Give everyone another minute to take their seats, please.
Helen would be pissed if you did. Yeah.
Okay. So welcome everyone to the Rev Up Mayoral Town Hall. I'm very happy to see all of your faces here today. My name is Lauren Alden, and I am a Rev Up Coalition member, and I'm also a staff member here at Liberty Resources, the Center for Independent Living. Just quick housekeeping rules. Please silence your phones if you have not done so yet. And there are accessible bathrooms out the door that you came into this room and straight across the hallway on the left. So we are tight on time, but I want to talk about Rev Up a bit. It's obviously very important to talk about who Rev Up is and why we're having this event. Rev Up is an acronym that stands for Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power. It's a national coalition that we joined that wants to make sure that people know the disability community is a major voting bloc. So we want to make sure candidates know that we're a major voting bloc. We want people with disabilities to know their rights when they go to the polls. And we want people with disabilities on the ballot. So those are the three main goals of this coalition. And so right here in Philadelphia, we have nearly 250,000 people who identify as having a disability. So if all of those folks decided to vote, we could and we would vote in a mayor who understands that accessibility is an integral piece of the puzzle that makes a city thrive. So Philadelphia, you know, when we talk about accessibility here, we don't mean just a ramp for a wheelchair. Of course that's important, and of course we need more of those. But we are talking about access to accessible, affordable housing, accessible, affordable health care, access to sign language interpreters, access to vote independently, particularly for those who are blind and low vision, access to affordable, healthy food, access to quality behavioral health care services through Medicaid. So we're talking about a lot. We want people who use wheelchairs to not have to roll out into the street every day and risk their lives. We want safe sidewalks. So we're asking to have a mayor who understands that access is a civil right, right? We want this event where there's a wheelchair accessible entrance, there's accessible bathrooms, there's an ASL interpreter, and a live streaming option. We want this to be the norm, right? Because we, people with visible and invisible disabilities, are the norm. We are the community. So with that being said, we're going to ask the candidates to take a minute to introduce themselves. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the elephant in the room, right? So there are some candidates who are not here. Yeah. So our coalition started inviting candidates to this event in February. And as you can see, the candidates in front of you responded and showed up. We had some candidates that did not respond at all, Amin Brown and Sherelle Parker. And then we have candidates who responded and at the last minute, the 11th hour, as in yesterday, canceled on us. So sometimes this is a good example of sometimes how just showing up says a lot and how not showing up speaks volumes. So I want to thank the candidates who are here and just... Once you've introduced yourself, we will then move on to the question portion. It is not a debate. These are questions that the disability community determined ahead of this forum. So we will not be having live questions. However, if you're left here wanting more, do not fret. We will have a disability voter guide that we'll put out over the next few weeks before the primary. And that guide has a disability questionnaire that we created, well, the community created, and we have sent to all the candidates, and they are answering those questions, they're a little more detailed questions about issues in Philadelphia that affect our community. So that guide will be electronic and a hard copy and accessible in all formats. So please keep a lookout for that guide. Once the community members ask their questions, we'll ask candidates to take about 3 minutes to respond. And we'll start in alphabetical order. And I'm going to invite Jeff Brown to go first.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear okay? Yeah. Good. I'm Jeff Brown. I'm running for mayor. I think the last 7.5 years have been very difficult years compared to my 59 years in the city, where I feel like we've slipped backwards on a lot of things. And the crime, especially gun violence, has been at very high levels. The drug overdoses has been at historically high levels. And when you rank this city with other cities around the country, we rank very poorly in most things. And so I'm very concerned about the future of the city. I feel we need more substantial change. And because a lot of the candidates came from government, I feel we need an outsider who will not accept what they decided before and fight independently to make the changes we need. And I thank you for inviting me. I just want to mention that our family deals with various members that have various challenges. And it's close to my heart, and I look forward to a good discussion today because it affects my family as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Judge Jimmy DeLeon, and I am a disabled candidate for mayor of Philadelphia. I have been in a constant state of physical therapy for the last 25, 26 years for various things. I would have came here today with my cane, but 3 days ago, I put my cane down because over the last 2.5 months that I have been in this race, I have been fighting on a daily basis to get rid of my crutches and to get rid of my cane. So 2 days ago, I finally overcame not having to use that cane, and I put it down. And I wasn't going to come here before you today and show you that cane. I wanted you to see my fight, because this is the fight that I will bring to Philadelphia as mayor. The same way that I fought to make myself better, I'm going to fight to make this city better. I'm going to fight to make this city better for you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee Owens. I'm the political director for Helen Gim's mayoral campaign. Obviously, I'm not Helen Gim, but representing her at this forum, unfortunately, she could not be here today due to some previous scheduling conflicts and engagements. But I'm happy to be here on the stage, surrounded by some juggernauts here in Philly, and hoping to talk to you a little bit about Helen's plan for Philadelphia and for how she plans to address some of the issues we face in terms of the disabled community. So I will tell you that one of her strongest things, and she's a firm believer in what we refer to as active mobility, which includes walking and rolling. Whether by wheelchair, bicycle, stroller, or scooter, we know that that particular aspect is a vital connection to Philadelphia and the Philadelphia community. Supports health and well-being, the environment, lowers personal spending, and Philadelphia is an extremely walkable city. However, walking and rolling are increasingly difficult and dangerous in some parts of the city because of illegal parking, construction-related sidewalk closures, missing or broken sidewalks, and dangerous roadway closings. And of course, crime, which limits Philadelphia's ability to safely and enjoy walking and rolling in the city. So Helen is a candidate that supports the kinds of practical solutions that are going to address those problems. As you may know, she was responsible for the mobile crisis response as it relates to our 911 system. So this is something, these are things that have always been on her mind, and I'm happy to continue to talk to you about some of those things today. Thank you.
All right, hello. My name's David O. I'm running for mayor as well. The difference is that I'm a Republican. We've not had a credible Republican run in about 20 years. The difference that it makes is this election doesn't end on May 16th. without me, this race would be over on May 16th. And I don't think that's good for the city. I don't think it's good for anybody, because I think there's some very important issues that get glossed over in a very short, quick race. So going to November 7th, there'll be time to go more deeply into the issues, because I think the issues are confusing to people. When we look at our city, why are there so many problems? What happened to the money? Where is the money? Why are obvious things not done? I think people are very frustrated about it, but during a campaign like this, you won't get into the depths of the issue unless we go all the way till November 7th with 2 candidates. So on my part, I was an attorney, and I resigned from being an attorney because I ended up getting elected for city council. I ran 3 times, and I lost twice, and then I won the 3rd time, the 4th time, and the 5th time. But thinking about the 6th time, I thought about the fact that every issue that I've tried to deal with, I think I have done. And it's very difficult on city council to get things done. And I very much challenge the administration, whether it was Michael Nutter or whether it was Jim Kenney. So I've been in that fight on behalf of a lot of people, whether it's your property taxes, whether it's accessibility that we're talking about, whether it's law enforcement, public safety, or whether we're fighting the Department of Human Services to make sure people don't lose their children. I think it's important to be in the fight, to know exactly what the fight is. And then from there, I'm running for mayor because everything I could not do as a legislator, I would like to be able to do as the mayor, because the mayor's got a lot of power in this town. And I think during the course of this election, you'll be able to go more deeply into what are the solutions, how can we get to them, and how can we deliver a better quality of life for everyone, yourselves included. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Reinhart, and I'm running for mayor because I believe that I'm the right person to lead Philadelphia forward in this truly critical moment that our city is in. I've spent the last 15 years working for the residents of our city, close to a decade for 2 different mayors, and then the last 5 as the independently elected city controller. I know the city's budget inside and out from being the city's budget director. And I've managed 1,000 city employees as the chief administrative officer of our city. I know the city's operational issues from auditing the departments as the city controller. I'm ready to hit the ground running on day 1 to fix the city's issues, to make our city safer, cleaner, and to fix our schools. Our next mayor also needs to have the courage to stand up to the status quo and make some serious changes in how this government works. And I've done that. I ran for city controller in 2017 against a long-term incumbent. I'm a Democrat, but I ran against the Democratic Party candidate. I had the support of 1 ward leader out of 69 ward leaders, but I won with 58% of the vote. And I think what that says then, and still says now, is that the people of our city want change. And as city controller, starting in 2018, I hit the ground running to stand up for the people of our city. I did audits on the police department, on the parking authority. I did investigations into the voting machine procurement, into the civil unrest, looking at how the city responded to the city civil unrest following George Floyd's murder. For all of these things, I made thoughtful recommendations to move our city forward. But that's where my power ended. As mayor, I can and will make that change happen to make our city government truly work for all people here. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I'm looking forward to, as mayor, making our city work for people with disabilities and tackling the issues that you face to make our city work better for everyone and be inclusive. So thank you so much. I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, candidates, for your introductions. Oh, sorry. Thank you, candidates, for your introductions. We're going to move on to our question period now. And I just want to make sure everybody remembers that we're not taking live questions or comments. This is a scheduled event. So we are going to get started with the first question, and that is Thomas Earl, Liberty Resources CEO. The topic is affordable, accessible housing, and we're going to start with Jeff Brown.
Good afternoon. Welcome to LRI. And according to our last U.S. Census, Philadelphia has the highest number of people with disabilities, 16% of our population, approximately 250,000 people with disabilities, and are the largest concentration of people with disabilities of any major U.S. city. Too often, people with disabilities are forced to live in expensive segregated nursing homes and other institutional settings because of the lack of accessible, affordable, integrated housing in our great city. If elected mayor, would you support city legislation that would require at least 50% of all federal and state housing dollars go to the development of accessible, affordable housing for households earning 25% or less of area median income?
So let me start out by saying that my mom is disabled, and when we tried to find her a place to live, we really couldn't find an accessible place at any price range. And I was shocked because I didn't realize this until we went on the search, how few of the properties are really accessible. They all had steps or other impediments. And we ended up having to pay to modify a house that wasn't accessible to make it accessible. So I am aware of the problem. And to the answer about federal dollars that go through Philadelphia Housing Authority, I'm not sure about the 50%, but I'm sure that not only do we need to maximize the use of our dollars, but the city should be contributing for accessible housing for underprivileged people that need it. And so, not sure of the percentage, I'm adding an extra twist, but everyone needs to have a place to live, and we should do it in an organized fashion. And if you're going to build accessible housing, you have to have that plan from the very beginning, so you design it in such a way so entrances, egress are into the house accessible, the bathrooms are accessible, which I've seen a real problem with. Very few bathrooms are designed to be accessible. So I am committed to this. I'm committed to making sure everyone has housing, and I'm committed to affordable housing, which is like maybe 60% of average income, and I'm committed to supporting public housing, which is like the 25% you were discussing. And between the two, I really hope over my first 2 terms, we could have a house for everyone. That's my plan. And I plan to bring three changes to make that happen. One is we're increasing people's taxes too much and forcing them in their homes. We need a cap on real estate tax increases to deal with the gentrification problem. 2, we have too many properties in the city land bank, like over 8,000, that are sitting vacant. They could be converted into affordable housing at more costly. And 3, just like I solved food deserts, by creating new financial tools to help mitigate the financial gap in the housing, I would create those tools to do large-scale, accessible, and affordable housing units. Thank you.
So this is something that I've fought for in the past myself. I have a program called the Local Incident Management System, which is a set of processes and procedures that would allow the city government to combat inaccessible housing by allowing the necessary respondents to work more effectively and efficiently together to manage the root causes of inaccessible housing. Now, the situation that I faced was when I was general counsel and counsel for the Housing Authority, where they had inaccessible housing. So I led the fight to turn many of the housing units into accessible housing units for the disabled. Now, I also was the individual that brought Section 8 here to Philadelphia. And at that time when I first brought it, of course, all the landlords wanted the Section 8 vouchers. So I was able to get at least 1/3 of the Section 8 landlords making their units accessible to the disabled. Now, as mayor, of course, I'm concerned about accessible housing. And what I would do is that I would have my city planners, because let's look at it like this, as I'm sure Rebecca will get to. There's like 4,200 units that we have here in the city that are vacant. We need to take at least 1/3 to 1/2 of those units, and we need to, through the city planners, develop them into affordable housing. We also need to have that, not just affordable housing, but affordable housing for the disabled. And we also need to, around these houses, make green spaces. And we also need to change the zoning code so that we can, well, let me explain why. Philadelphia was a factory city. And as a factory city, there were single-family dwellings that were built for the individuals that worked in the factory. Philadelphia is no longer a factory city, but we have zoning for single-family dwellings. In order for us to have more people live in affordable housing, we have to change the zoning code to multiple family dwellings. Then when we have the city planners do the planning for the new housing, we'll have a cross-section of basically affordable housing and green space, because green space is also important for our well-being. It's important for everyone's well-being. So with all these aspects put together, you will eventually have, within the first term of me as mayor, 50% of the housing will be for accessible, affordable housing for the disabled.
So Councilwoman Gim has been an extremely staunch proponent of housing security for all marginalized people for her entire career. Many of you know that she founded the housing, the eviction prevention program, pardon me. And the eviction prevention program created a process and procedure to prevent folks from getting evicted from their homes because Philadelphia had one of the highest eviction rates in the country. And so I'm bringing that up because, again, housing security is something that's near and dear to her heart. And that goes for all marginalized people, but people with disabilities in particular, because she views it as one of the key components to addressing, the violence and the crime that's occurring in our city. And so, I think that, as mayor, she would be the kind of mayor that brings this kind of coalition to the table to discuss the specifics of how she would implement that kind of program. But I can assure you, that Gim City Hall would be very supportive of a plan like that. Not sure about the percentage, but again, that's something that can be talked about and discussed. But clearly, there is a need there. And as the progressive candidate in the race, I think she is uniquely suited to fight for those kinds of things. So again, I think it's something that she would continue to talk to organizations and coalitions like this one about the specifics. But you would have a friend and a true partner in City Hall under a Gim administration.
So just so we're clear, the question is, if elected mayor, would you support city legislation that would require at least half of all federal and state housing dollars to go to develop accessible, affordable housing for households earning 25% or less? So it's kind of a yes/no question.
Yeah, I don't want to lock into a specific percentage, but I can say yes with a separate conversation on exactly what percentage this is going to be half. But yeah, I would say a yes with a further conversation about how to negotiate the percentage there, as to not make promises on behalf of my candidate.
Yeah, I would say, is this working? Okay. I would say I don't know. I would say I don't know because I think there's a lot of details that you have to go through. So first of all, I've seen better, and it's not in Philadelphia, and it's not even in the United States. I've seen better. Other countries in other nations do a much, much better job. And I think one of the first things is we should be aware of what can be better before we start committing ourselves to basically trying to deal with housing that was built in entire neighborhoods without any type of accessibility in mind. So that's pretty expensive to do, and I'm not sure how beneficial it is because there's all kind of levels of disabilities that people have. I think that there are some very large reforms that have to happen in our city around affordable housing and about housing in general. What we've seen is that this current system generally is very supportive of developers who want to put in very expensive housing, and it's not very good about affordable. And when I was in council, I introduced a bill to provide $50 million a year from the general fund directly to the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund got about $17 million a year. This would be on top of that every year, $50 million to bring it to $67 million in a very predictable manner. You could multiply that out times 10 years and be able to leverage that money. The second thing, however, is there has to be some reforms of the Housing Trust Fund, because while I am not against inclusionary housing, there's a problem with it when you're trying to basically build very expensive residences or condominiums or whatever you're doing, because that's where everybody makes their money, from the unions to the developer and everyone else. But that is not going to solve this problem. We really have to build affordable housing where it's needed, where people, for the cost that the people can afford, and to bring the workforce from the community to build those homes. When we're dealing with particularly trying to address the issues of accessibility for persons with disabilities, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of conditions to consider. For example, we have people in the military who end up with disabilities. We have people as they age, we're all gonna have disabilities, and there are people with all sorts of different disabilities and different levels. One of the things that I've seen in other cities is that the use of technology is really much, much more purposeful. And so big data, smart cities, smart aging includes accessibility. And the more that we have basically residences that the work is done for you through the technology, it provides for a more independent quality of life. And that's something that I would like to see we do as a city.
In terms of the legislation, I am definitely open to discussing the percentage of the federal and state dollars that would go to 25% or less AMI. What I will commit to, though, is bringing disability experts and members of the community into my office and into the conversation around what my housing plan will look like as mayor. Because as mayor, I plan to have a citywide housing plan. And from my experience working in 2 administrations, you can have great legislation, but if you don't have a mayor that's willing to implement that legislation, that's willing to hold those accountable and have consequences if the legislation is not followed, then it does not serve its purpose. So what I will commit to as mayor is being committed to creating housing that is that does serve the community with disabilities and that brings your voices into that planning process. And I have a plan for creating affordable housing citywide. The city owns 8,500 vacant properties and lots throughout this city. And as city controller, I asked my staff to map a portion of it just because I wanted to go see it. And I drove through the streets in West Philadelphia. And in some areas, the city owns blocks of dilapidated housing. And this is completely unacceptable. As mayor, I want to transform that housing into affordable housing. It's a huge opportunity for the city to do that. And I plan to work with city council members in order to accomplish that vision citywide. So I look forward to bringing you to the table and having together us build an affordable housing plan that includes disability access and best practices among the disability community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our second question will come from Charles Horton, the SEPTA CCT Program Eligibility and Regulatory Compliance Manager, and the topic will be gun violence. There you are.
Hello, everyone. As you say, my name is Charles Horton. I am a gunshot survivor. And the question I just want to ask is a lot of the candidates have talked about gun violence and your plan for gun violence. So we want to hear about what your plan is, and we also want to hear about what is your plan post-gun violence for survivors. Because a lot of times people, once they're shot, they go back into the same communities that they have to live in which they were shot, so they don't want to testify against the individuals. So the same people stay in the street and continue to victimize individuals. So, and a lot of times there is no programs available, mental health programs, and a lot of different things are just not there to support post-gun violence, and there needs to be more access to it. So can you give us an overview of what your plan is pre-gun violence and post-gun violence?
And we're actually going to start with James DeLeon for this one.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So we start with my local incident management system, which for this is a set of processes and procedures that would allow the city government to combat gun violence by allowing the necessary responders to work more effectively and efficiently together to manage the root causes of gun violence. Now, as far as my particular plan is concerned, let's take some of the elements that would be working in that local incident management system. The city of Philadelphia, with the legislative system, the city council, not a single one of those members did anything to combat gun violence in the city of Philadelphia back when they were still on council. None of them approached the mayor. The mayor himself, he had issues with the district attorney. So there was dysfunction in our executive branch and our legislative branch. At the same time, we have the judicial system where I'm from. Not a single one of these individuals came over to the court system to ask us, what do we feel can be done to reduce gun violence? Now, as part of my local incident management plan, the court is involved. One of the things that the court will do is anybody that's arrested for gun violence, domestic violence, assaultive behavior, on a case-by-case basis, they would receive a social media ban. Now, what we have found out is that social media is the driving force for a lot of the violence that we have in our city. You yourself have seen it as to what took place at Roxborough last year, what took place at Overbrook High School with the 2 shootings last year, what took place this year at Fells High School where the young man was killed, what took place 2 weeks ago when the 14-year-old was killed, and a couple of other kids were injured. So, on a case-by-case basis, we would do that. The other aspect that would go through the court is that they would get a social media, a curfew ban, where depending on their education requirements or their work requirements, they would be out at 6 in the morning, but they would have to be in by 9 in the morning. So what happens is that we're doing a less cluttered field for the police to do their own anti-gun violence programs. The other situation is that I would be funding community grassroots groups that would be working directly with the juveniles and the young people that are the ones that are prone to gun violence. And I would also be giving money to the district attorney's office for the victims of violence as well as the witnesses of violence, okay? Because they need the same type of treatment. Thank you.
So, is it us? Okay. So I think that, Councilwoman Gim has said in the past, that you can't talk about dealing and solving the problem of gun violence in Philadelphia without talking about the children, teenagers who, seem to be, to a large extent, the perpetrators of these unfortunate crimes. And, the lack of, educational opportunities, community spaces, closed rec centers and playgrounds throughout many of our, low income communities, right? And I will say that, as someone who personally left West Philly as a single father, I'm raising a 16-year-old son, we moved to Roxborough because there were supposed to be better public schools, right? So I had to take him out of Roxborough and send him back to West Philly to Paul Robeson for high school. So, Councilwoman Gim has said that every student, every child should be able to walk to a decent school, right? Walk to a good school. And we know that there is a direct link between the times where, 15, 16 years ago, where, there was this string of school closings and, a direct link between that and what we see today as an epidemic of gun violence in our city. So, the way, Councilwoman Gim has talked about dealing with that is multifaceted, right? It begins with, bringing together all city services. She has talked about declaring a state of emergency. It is a public health crisis. I mean, we can't deny that. And so because it is a public health crisis and because she would declare a state of emergency, she has discussed bringing all city services together to coalesce around how to deal with this issue from the perspective of every one of those city services, whether it be SEPTA, Department of Health. They all need to come together to have, whether it be weekly or bi-weekly calls in coordination so that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. Nothing like that is happening right now. The next thing I'll say with my minute is that I personally met with all of the heads of the victim services units, the big six across the city, and there needs to be a lot of work going into revamping how we imagine those offices because they're lacking in a lot of things. Like they're lacking in funding, they're lacking in coordination. They don't know what the courts are doing. They don't know what the DA's office is doing. So there's no coordination. So that has to change, right? It can't be this these obscure offices where nobody knows what's going on, right? So I think the ways to deal with that again are multifaceted. And she has talked about, again, the need for spaces for kids to exist. Because, again, the children are the ones really perpetuating these violent crimes. And the other thing I'll say with my 10 seconds left is that, you can go to HelenGim.com. We have one of the most comprehensive, gun violence prevention and public safety programs, platforms in the race. So check out the website to learn more.
Our city has had a long history of violence, and it comes and goes at times. It peaks. I remember the gang war years, the late 60s, early 70s, crack cocaine. I remember when there was a battle between marijuana and cocaine dealers in West Philly. There's a cycle that we go through, and that is that there is a strong effort against crime. Then there is a reduction of that effort, which is more targeted, probably more intelligent. And then we loosen up quite a bit, and then crime returns. And then the response is we're going to drop a hammer on crime. And it's an overreaction, and we go through these cycles. We're in a time where we're about to go into dropping the hammer, an overreaction. I think it's a good idea that we skip that step and go right to smart, intelligent policing and law enforcement. We look at exactly where the problem is because it's not all over our city. It originates and exists in certain communities. And in those communities, people want law enforcement. They want policing. They want 911 to answer the call and to come out. They want to feel safe. They don't feel safe They feel neglected. And I think it is important that we address that feeling of neglect because that's driving a lot of the anger into young people as well. And so right now we have a particular problem of very young people, 13 to 17-year-olds, for example, who are intentionally going out looking for other young people with an intent to kill them, to shoot them multiple times. This is something everyone in the neighborhood knows. They know the vehicles, they know the people who are doing it. What they don't understand is why the police don't intervene. And that is something that the mayor has to get on top of and make sure that there's that intervention. The police must engage with the community. They must be welcome into the community. So they need better training. They need better technology. They need to address these issues and they need to show up. The other part where we're having a big problem is in the drug dealing, and Kensington Avenue is a prime example of that, where the idea to allow people to come to Kensington and to do drugs out in the open, and to go purchase those drugs from people out in the open, and to get their money through prostitution and other things out in the open with the residents trapped inside. That is an overwhelming problem. It cannot be dealt with on a person-by-person basis. The big problem is that the location exists there, and that location brings many more people year after year there, and they live there. So that place has to be shut down. What it also funds, all of that money, is more crime. And once we can deal with those major pieces of criminality, we can then deal with addressing the regular crime that we also face in our public gathering places, schools, and communities.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca?
Great. So I've put forth a detailed plan to tackle the gun violence crisis in our city. Since 2019, I've been calling on Mayor Kenney to implement the proven intervention strategies that work to get the violence down. These are strategies such as group violence intervention, cure violence, cognitive behavior therapy, focusing on those most likely to shoot or be shot, offering them a way out of that lifestyle with consequences if they don't take it. What's been found is the majority will take that opportunity to get out. And we've seen significant reductions, 50% reduction in homicide rate in Oakland, 27% in New Orleans, and that's what I will implement as mayor. In addition, on day one, I will activate the city's Emergency Operations Center to coordinate not just the police department response, but the streets department to fix lighting in high crime areas and other departments to be focused as well. And I also will tackle illegal guns by pulling together the district attorney and the police commissioner to get on the same page. My work as controller showed that over the last 5 years, the police have doubled the number of arrests for illegal carry, while the conviction rate by the DA has declined from 65% to 42%. We need to get in the same room. The DA has said that the police cases aren't good enough. Well, let's just get together and figure this out so that we can all move forward together and get these guns off of our streets. In terms, I just addressed the short-term gun violence solutions. The long-term solution to the gun violence is opportunity, right? Is fixing the education system, is creating job pathways. I want to take my last minute to address the services that need to be provided to survivors of gun violence. And often the city doesn't do a good enough job at all there. So part of that is making sure there is witness relocation funds, making sure that there's support for survivors, making sure that the city's behavioral health funding, the city gets $1 billion a year, making sure that trauma treatment, that therapy is being provided to survivors to help them through this process in their life. So as mayor, I will do all of this to make our city safer and to help those that have survived gun violence get it through that period of their life to be the best person that they can be. So thank you.
Hi. It's very disturbing, the level of violence in the city today. And as a grocer running our ShopRite and Fresh Grocer grocery stores in a lot of inner city locations, I lay witness to my employees being shot or in some cases murdered, or their family members or my customers. And so I see the human suffering of this crisis. And I think the solution, the problem does emanate from structural poverty, that people are stuck in and can't get out. And when it gets very hopeless and seems bleak, it seems like the violence goes up. So we can't forget that this is a poverty problem. But to address it, I want to start out with 3 areas. One is keeping children busy. We have 4 kids, and my wife's idea was keep them busy all the time, they'll stay out of trouble. And in the poorest big city in the country, you need the city's help to do that. And the city really has pulled resources out of a lot of the things that we count on, like rec centers and not having lifeguards in swimming pools and not having librarians, some cases not at all, or not on the weekends, or not having weekend hours. And I was chairman of Philadelphia Youth Network, and we would help young people get summer internships every year. We never had more than half the funding we needed to serve all the kids that apply. And so I feel like we have underfunded this for many decades, and we created our own problem, and we need to reverse that. The second thing is when children start to go in the wrong direction, the whole public system sees signs of it. You're in school and the child's acting up and starting to act violently, and we should have intervention at that time, not wait for someone to get hurt. And there's a lot of programs to do this. Like I was on the board of Man Up PHL run by Solomon Jones, and he has mentorship, people that have been through the criminal justice system and have turned their lives around. They mentor young people to try to help them. I want to go into crime. I have been endorsed by almost every police organization in the city. Because of my management skills, they think that that's the skill we need. We have changes we need to make in policing. Well, one is we need to rehire 1,500 officers that are vacant. I think this is a historic opportunity to diversify those officers. I think it's an opportunity to train them with a service mentality and a de-escalation skill set, to prevent problems. I also think we need technology like forensics, gunshot cameras. We do need to fix the lights and the blight, because all that affects crime, and that's a plan to turn this situation around. And we need to properly fund assistance for people that have been injured, that have been the subject of violence, and we don't fund that properly today.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. Sorry. Thank you all for that. We're going to go to our third question. Our presenter is Andrea Brooks. She is a Liberty Resources Young Adults Group. She's a community member and a disability rights advocate. And this topic is going to be on law enforcement. And we're going to start with Helen Gibbs, political director.
Hi, my name is Andrea Brooks, and the question is, what types of trainings will you offer law enforcement on how to respectfully interact with members of the disabled community while on duty, and will the disabled community have input into the training?
Thank you. And Lee, we're going to start with you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. First of all, yes, the disability community will have some say in that 100%. I think a lot of what this work is about building coalitions that have a seat at the table, and that you have, ongoing coalescing around, not just a one-off, but something that continues, that you continue to build on year after year. So again, that's what you will have in a GIM City Hall. You'll have a partner to kind of like hash those things out, and even, not saying that, we'll always agree, but we'll always be able to have conversations to figure out what the best course of action is. So I'll definitely say yes to that. In terms of policing and like dealing with people that are disabled, I keep going back to mental health, but I know that's just one aspect of the disabled community. But I go back to mental health for this particular question because I can't help but think about Walter Wallace, right? Walter Wallace was having a mental health crisis. And instead of sending him what he needed, sending his family what he needed, which was mobile crisis response, which was some sort of mental health response, he was sent force, you know? And so I think, you know, one of the ways that we have to reimagine policing when there is like an emergency, when there is a 911 call, we have to reimagine that to the extent that the police shouldn't be doing the job of a mental health professional. Right, and so while there is going to be some interaction between police and members of the disabled community, I think it starts with reimagining how the job that police actually do, right, so that we can, you know, eliminate those opportunities for things to go awry when there's a misunderstanding. But I think in terms of training, I think, you know, police definitely need, and I think everybody on this panel can agree that police just need better training, right, and that's better training dealing with people with disabilities. That's better training with dealing with, you know, low-income people, in some cases, in a lot of cases, people of color, right? And so, you know, when you think about, you know, being, you know, tough on crime, you have to also look at ways in which dealing with crime and dealing with crime intervention, looking at how the police actually respond to those things and when it makes sense for a cop to respond as opposed to somebody that can actually deal with the problem. Because, you know, everything isn't always about punitive measures, right? Sometimes people just need, like, they need to be checked into a mental health facility, right? Or so this is about, you know, the kind of understanding between law enforcement and the disabled community that we'd be able to bring forth through coalition building and continued support for that particular population. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think training is very important. Officers they go through the academy, then they go to work, they do their shifts, and when they have their time off, they have their time off. We have to build into it training like continuing education, that they get a certain amount of training every year and they get refreshers as well. I did a resolution for minimum force training, which I don't think is difficult to understand. If you are trained to use maximum force, when you're under stress, when you're under pressure, when you go to muscle memory, that's what you do. If you are trained to use maximum force physically, you will go to maximum force. You do have to train a person because when you are in fear of your life, you see things differently. That's what your body does. It's supposed to do that. So someone seems more of a threat. They seem closer than further. The thing is, police have the authority to pull out a gun and shoot you. And so we do have responsibility to train them to be calm under pressure and to not to do that and understand when they will be able to protect their weapon and deal with a situation, even a physical situation, with minimum force or no force, that you don't actually have to even confront. Sometimes you could just withdraw. Sometimes that is the best thing to do. They have to have that culture built in. When it comes to dealing with persons with physical disabilities or mental disabilities, that is something that they have to be trained on. It's not a difficult training in the sense that I don't believe the police hate to do it, but you have to make it part of their day. In other words, if we're doing minimum force training, if we're doing training on understanding persons with disabilities, do they do that after their shift? Do they do that on the weekend? No, they do it during their work period. And we do need them on the job, but we need them to come in while they're being paid to go to these classes to learn about things that are very helpful to them. And I think they would feel that it is professional development for them. What happens when you answer a 911 call? First of all, there should be something in the 911 response that identifies the person is blind or has a hearing disability or is in a wheelchair or doesn't have full use of their hands or arms. That should be the first thing that occurs when 911 is called, that is sent to those officers in the district. There should be a general education for all police officers that respond to the public, but there should be designated people in each police district that specifically know how to work with the nonprofits, the social services. They understand what healthcare is there. They understand about the hospitals, who's doing what. When they show up, do they have an ability to transport? What about all the other things that accommodate someone with a disability?
So as mayor, I would make sure that there is ample police training, and I would look to the disability community to help me pick that training, decide upon that training, because I want to hear your lived experience and interaction with the police to determine what is the best training. And then I want to talk with experts in the field to make sure that the training that we put our police force through is one that is the best possible training on this. Because if you do have a disability, if, for example, you are deaf and interact with the police, you need a sign language interpreter. And if you don't have that, it's not a good situation. And so as a city, we need to figure out how to be more inclusive. And this involves policing and police interaction with the disabled community. In general, I think that the police need to be trained, like many city departments, on how to be more inclusive and how to interact with the public. So that is something that's incredibly important to me, that I will prioritize, and that the disabled community will be part of the process to determining the solution as we move forward. Thank you.
So I do agree what happened to Walter Wallace could have been avoided, prevented, if we had the right system. And I think this is what the system looks like, and we would need input from the disabled community to make sure that we got it right, make sure we're covering all the circumstances. So it starts out with 911. 911 has to be staffed properly because our wait times are too long. But when you do call 911, they should triage the situation and assess what talent's needed to resolve the situation. If it's a person with a mental health illness, I think it's very important that they know that, because the response should be a police officer and a mental health professional. And the police officer should have training in managing people with mental health challenges. And right now, we're not even asking the question, we're just sending people out that are completely unequipped to do it. And when I talked previously about hiring 1,500 officers, some police officers and some public safety officers, I think we have an opportunity not only hire a much more diverse workforce, but to hire people with different backgrounds. And some of the people would hopefully have a mental health background, and we could teach them about policing, and some of the police officers could be trained in the best way to de-escalate mental health trauma. And when tensions are at the highest, they should have tools other than lethal tools to get the situation under control. The first effort should be to de-escalate, calm things down. If that doesn't work, they should have other tools. Like, they should have used a taser before they use a gun. They should de-escalate before they did that. And I feel that our police officers, we're sending them out not properly equipped, both educational-wise and tool-wise, to address the situation. And others have talked about it. There are other type of disabilities, like if you can't hear. And I don't think that that's triaged on 911, and we don't have proper or adequate solutions to address everyone in our city, and that needs to change. And I'm committed to that, and it is in my plan on my website, my crime plan.
So the question that's being asked is based on how we look upon things today. But with my program, the local incident management system is going to revolutionize the way municipalities address and solve their problems. So let's just take the issue of courtesy and respect and put that on the side for a second. While my program is going through the neighborhood revitalizing and recovering the neighborhood, getting the gun program under control, the homicide program under control, bringing jobs to those who need the jobs, overcoming the poverty situation that we have, creating a neighbors helping neighbors recover the neighborhood situation. We know that there's disrespect, not just for the disabled, but for the LGBTQ community and also for the black and brown communities as a whole as well. So I have a buffer that's put in there, a community coach, that whenever there's a whenever there's a issue that's non-criminal, 311 would be called, and that buffer would come out, and that person or persons, they're trained for mental health, post-traumatic stress, CPR, anything that they would need in order to be aware of how to handle a non-criminal situation. And if they did need the police, they would have a silent buzzer. Now, what this does, it creates some space between the neighborhood and the police, where the neighborhood can recover from the police as far as their lack of courtesy and respect, and the police will be able to do general policing. Now, let's go back to the situation of courtesy and respect. I'm a judge. In my courtroom, no matter what you were brought in there for, you were looked upon as a human and you were treated with courtesy and respect. And that's the exact same thing that my entire administration would be charged with. They would treat every citizen with courtesy and respect. So each one of these officers would be trained differently under my system because they're all part of that local incident management system, which I'm explaining to you a little bit at a time because we don't have a lot of time to explain. So each one of my officers, when they come in contact with a disabled person, they would know that because this person is disabled, this does not mean they are going to be treated any way other than with courtesy and respect. The same way with LGBTQ, the same way with black and brown people, because that's what I want and what I'm going to get.
Okay, thank you. So the fourth question comes to us from Michael Anderson from the ARC of Philadelphia, and the topic is the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. And the candidate that will start answering first would be David O. Where are you, Michael? There you are.
So basically, I would thank everybody for coming today before I start with my question. Okay, here we go with my question. The Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities is one of the most understaffed and small operating budget compared to equivalent offices. As the Mayor of Philadelphia, what will you do to have an equalized budget, basically? So they have more resources to hire people, and more budgets to help people out with complaints and so on and so forth.
Yes, thank you. So I do, agree it's underfunded. Again, you know, there are so many different groups of people that will, if they do not already suffer a disability. And we have to prepare for that. But I think we're still looking at, you know, putting the lights lower, making a ramp. I think that's not what the Office of Disability should be doing. Of course, it provides services, coordinates services, but I'd like to see more about technology. When we look at, for example, Singapore, and how well they deal with the fact that they're on an island, they cannot build more hospital space, so they're very efficient about using that space. They're trying to predict what is going to happen, how many beds they need, how quickly they move people through. That's not something we do in this city. I think we should because, again, we can really start moving to technology that assists people, allows them to live independently and live better. When I was in my first term, I visited 35 different locations, seniors, and many of them had disabilities. And it was about smart cities, smart aging. We were doing a partnership in data. And when I looked at this, it was before the pandemic and before a lot of things that we have now. But for example, the idea that you would go into your room and the air conditioning or the heating would adjust itself to you. That the things that you would do, for example, in your daily life, such as when you go to urinate, that would be analyzed, and then the big data would say to your physician, be careful, this person is about to have a health condition. We can intervene in that. There's a lot of things that we can do currently that the technology is available, and if we would make a model, I wanted to make a model living condition. And the models are great because people get to actually see and live in and look at the real costs of doing something like that as opposed to hearing it theoretically. So the Office of Disability would not only deal with the current situations, but we'd be part of planning out our city, affordable housing, working with our universities, things like that to provide a better quality of life. Our goal, that office's goal, should be to create the best physical layout of the city with actual services so that people can have the technology and the lifestyle, that the quality of life and their contribution and how happy they are and fulfilled they are is greatly increased in a place called Philadelphia.
So the Mayor's Office of Disabilities in my administration will be the focal point of a lot of these different initiatives. So for example, as I'm shepherding my citywide housing plan, I would want the Mayor's Office of Disabilities to be weighing in on what housing looks like across the city for the disability community. I would want my Mayor's Office of Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities to be assisting me with looking at all of our city departments to make sure they are accessible. I know for a fact that we have many city buildings that are not accessible. And we need to improve that, starting with the city-owned buildings and infrastructure. And then we need to go to what we just discussed, police training. Other employees and other departments probably need training as well that interact with the public and need to be better equipped and know how to deal with people with disabilities. So the way that I would go about this would be on May 17th, after hopefully my victory, I will come back and want to include the community and your voices in planning what needs to change with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities and what does my overall organization and administration look like to make it better than the way it is set up currently. Thank you.
So I think that this department is underfunded because the city really has not demonstrated concern for people with disabilities. They haven't really done the work to help people they should do. And so if you're not going to do the work, I guess they figure, why pay the money for the department? So I think it starts out with that's not acceptable. That has to change. As has been pointed out, a lot of Philadelphians have some kind of disability. And this is a place where people come and expect accessibility and assistance. And so I think it starts out with a vision for where we want to go as a city, to be the most accessible place for people with disabilities. And then you need to build a team and fund it to make that happen. And that team should really be at almost every major decision to make sure that people that don't deal with disabilities understand people that do what they're dealing with and how this decision affects them. And I don't see that today. That department needs to concern themselves with advocacy, to make sure that we're getting the resources from federal and state levels and that people with disabilities are considered when crafting legislation at both of those levels. I don't really see that. And with the average person that needs help, that there's a place to go to for help and to be directed towards resources, and when we don't have enough resources, to fight with the mayor and to go to city council and explain to them why we need more resources. So I would staff the department. I think they need lawyers because they got to keep on top of legislation, and they need advocates that are going to really fight, and that office should be staffed with the direction of the people in this room. So you guide us and make sure we have strong advocates that won't accept anything short of what is needed.
So this office affects all in the city of Philadelphia who have a disability. And the situation is, as it's been pointed out, that Philadelphia is one of the largest cities in the world that has the most disabled people. So with my plan, the local incident management system, I would declare disability a dramatic incident, because it is. And with that, that would mobilize the system to deal with that problem. Now, how would we deal with that problem with this particular office? Okay, everybody in this office, the people who man this office would all receive training under the Federal Emergency and Management Act to become incident specialists. Once they become incident specialists, then they can work with other incident specialists that I have trained under the Director of Public Safety to implement plans that would deal directly with overcoming the problems that we have with the disabled. Now, I myself am a disabled individual, so obviously, and I'm also an incident specialist. So obviously, I would be very concerned with how this particular office operates. Now, the question was asked earlier, would I use disabled as far as the planning is concerned? And yes, the answer is yes, and this is the department that would be doing the necessary work on behalf of the disabled, along with me, along with my Director of Public Safety, because the situation is dire. We need to have everything in place for those who have disabilities. They cannot function as if it's a normal situation. There is special care that's needed, and special dollars have to go into making sure that they have that special care. Now, we have $800 million that has to be spent within the next 2.5 years. It used to be $1.4 billion. The mayor has taken $353 million to use in 2023. There's now $800+ million left that has to be spent by 2025. In my administration, I would take $400 million of those dollars. Out of that $400 million, I would take the necessary money to fund that particular office for the disabled. And it would have the training, it would have the necessary technological staff that it needs, it would have the IT that it needs, it would have everything it needs, because we need to make Philadelphia a beaming light for those that are disabled. We need them to be able to come here for treatment if they so need. We want them to come here and live. We want them to have the necessary housing to be supportive, self-wise right here in Philadelphia.
So the way to, I think, begin to address some of the gaps in the mayor's office on people with disabilities and the GIM administration would be to obviously there's some funding gaps that likely need to be addressed as we look at other city services as well with similar funding gaps. But I think in terms of how that office operates, I think it begins with bringing people like you into the fold immediately on day one, and in the transition team, right? And assessing what that office is currently doing, how they're currently operating, and stacking that up against what people that are actually disabled need. Obviously, more buildings that are accommodating, is one, but I'm sure there are a slew of issues that, if brought into, like I said, our transition team, we'd be able to come up with a list of things that we want to do to make the office better. But I just think it goes back to, the kind of leadership that's going to crowdsource these sorts of decisions from the people that they actually affect. Some people, think they have all the answers. I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but I'm just saying, as people, sometimes we think we have all the answers, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's important to talk to the people with the lived experience and figure out, what kinds of things are going to make that office better and what it's going to take for us to get there as a community. And again, I think that's across the board for a lot of the mayor's office, groups. So I think it's a matter of bringing people to the table and hearing what they have to say and being an ongoing partner within these various diverse constituency groups so that we all can live the kind of lives that we deserve. And again, that's what you get from a Helen Gim administration. You get a partner, you get someone that's going to always listen to what you have to say, and it's going to take that into consideration when making these tough decisions. And let's keep in mind there will be a lot of tough decisions. But again, there isn't a leader in this state, in this country, that can make a decision without talking to somebody. So you are going to be the people that Councilwoman Gim talks to when making these decisions and figuring out how to move forward. It's what we've been doing, it's what she's done, it's how we've run the campaign, it's how she will run City Hall.
Thank you for that. So our fifth question is coming from presenter Sarita Kimball, who's retired from the Department of Veterans Affairs Medical Center, where she served as the Employee Labor Relations Specialist. The topic will be accessibility in Philadelphia, and we're going to start with Rebecca Reinhardt.
Thank you. Oh, I see her. It's right back here, right?
Thank you. My name is Sarita Kimball. This question is about citywide access, from crumbling sidewalks to inaccessible mental health services. People with disabilities in this city, whether they're dealing with sensory, physical barriers, mental health, or sensory barriers, we want to have a good quality of life. We want to live independently, and we want to be appreciated. What would your commitment be to addressing the plans as laid out in the city's ADA process be to address our ability to live independently, to have a quality of life that we can enjoy, that we can participate in everything that goes on in this city? We need to know how you would, on your first day, begin to implement programs, plans, processes, procedures, and interactions with our community so that we can be a part of the whole design of this city. Thank you for responding.
I just wanted to say, I think you were referring to the ADA transition plan in the beginning. Okay, thank you.
So thank you for that question. And the way that I would address that on day one as mayor is that I would invite you and members of the disability community and advocacy groups into the mayor's office to have a conversation around what does success look like, what changes need to happen, how do we get there, and what is the timeline. I'm very big in establishing goals and timelines so that we are all driving for the same improvements in the same timeline, and I'll hold my administration accountable to get there. That's the type of manager I am, that if I commit to something, I'm going to have my team do it. And that's the way that I'll lead. On the specific topics that you raise, one on sidewalks. Sidewalks are, of course, private property, but as part of my plans on my website, RebeccaForPhiladelphia.com, what I've proposed is that for low-income homeowners, that homeowners can use the basic income home repair funds to repair their sidewalks. Because what I learned from being the city's budget director is the city pays out millions and millions of dollars in settlements from lawsuits each year from people that get hurt from sidewalks. So instead of paying out millions of dollars to settle claims after people get hurt, I feel that we should put the money in beforehand to actually be able to have people fix their sidewalks than have people be injured. On behavioral health services, one of my priorities is to make sure that the behavioral health system of the city is reaching people in need and in ways that they can communicate. So for the disability community, we need to do a much better job at that. And so I will commit to that as well. And on ADA ramps and the ADA plan, that needs to happen. And as mayor, I will be a proponent of it. And I want the city to be accessible. I want everyone in the disability community to be able to live independently and be able to thrive, because you're part of Philadelphia. And I want to make a Philadelphia that you are happy with and can live in the way that makes you the happiest and that is the most accessible to you. So that's the way that I'll lead as mayor.
So I think the city sets a very bad example that they have a bunch of violations of ADA in their own buildings. And I don't know how you hold anyone else accountable if you don't fix your own buildings. So I would take the entire list of fixes, most of which are not costly. I would bid the entire list up front my first day in office, and I would commit to getting the whole list complete in 1 year. So all of the city's properties are properly accessible, with the only exception of it's physically impossible or just absorbently expensive, which most of the items are not like that. The second thing about sidewalks is that I think we're somewhat talking out of both sides of our mouths. We made the sidewalks the property of the homeowner, but we know we're the poorest big city in the country, and a lot of our lower income citizens and also disabled citizens can't afford to fix those sidewalks. And I believe for low income households, the city should take the responsibility of fixing those sidewalks. And the city should take the responsibility to review all the sidewalks in the city. And it's unacceptable to have broken sidewalks that would prevent a person on a mobile device, or a wheelchair or some other type of mobile device, from using the sidewalk. And so we would have to hold more affluent households responsible to fix those sidewalks. We have to send them a picture and notify them to let them know it's their responsibility. And we need action on that. Because when people I know that are disabled or in Philadelphia, they don't like to visit me because they're not independent. They can't get around any neighborhood. Every neighborhood has uneven sidewalks or broken sidewalks, and some of the ramps to the sidewalks are broken as well, which is the city's responsibility, and they are not taking care of their responsibility. As far as access to behavioral health, I think our community behavioral health function, or nonprofit, needs a modernization of their approach. And you know, in the healthcare business, we have new innovations like physician's assistants and nurse practitioners and technology to get more healthcare for less cost. And I think the behavioral health area needs to go through an evolution of improving their efficiency that they could serve all of us and where we need service. And I think a business person would be a good person to go in and push them to think out of the box and come up with a way. They get $1.6 billion a year, not a billion, $1.6 billion a year. They need to be able to serve all of us for that. That's a lot of money. They need to be able to serve all of us.
So I wouldn't need to have a meeting to discuss the situation because I myself have had the issues in my handicapped situation. So as mayor, all I would do initially is put out a proclamation that all city-owned buildings and properties are to be handicapped accessible. I would also work with City Council to pass any ordinance that is needed for restaurants to be handicap accessible if they're not already so. It would also go to any private corporations that are putting themselves out to the public at large, such as Comcast, Apple, any of those particular corporations, that any of their offices in the city of Philadelphia are to be handicapped accessible. And if they do not have bathrooms that are for the general public, they have to have bathrooms for the handicapped. That's a necessity. Now, the other situation, when we look at the sidewalks that we're talking about, now this situation I would use by giving low-interest loans to those who have to fix their sidewalks to make them accessible to people on scooters or anything like that that need wheelchairs. I myself used to use a wheelchair at one time. So for any of that, I would give them a low-interest loan. Something like 1.25%, and I'd give them 10 years to pay it back, you know, a nice bit of time. I don't want to make it hard on the individuals, but I want to make those sidewalks accessible. Now, the reason why I take that from the federal government. When we have situations where there are calamities, such as tornadoes or things like that, and when the federal government comes out to give you help in order to get your home back, they have two types of loans that they can give you. They can give you, well, I'm calling them a loan, but they can give you a grant depending on what kind of money you bring in, or they can give you a low-interest loan that you can pay off in a long period of time. That's what I would like to do for those homeowners. I would give them a low-interest loan to everyone that needs it. If they have a sidewalk that needs to be fixed, you are going to have to fix it, and I'm going to give you a loan. It might only cost you $25 to $30 a month to pay it back over the next 10, 15 years, but we're going to get that sidewalk fixed.
So in 2017, Councilwoman Gim passed a bill, and in that bill, it was to ensure safe passage around construction sites for the sidewalks. So just to give you that context, that this is something that she's worked on. When she introduced the bill in 2017, there were very few, if any, protections in place for pedestrians, and we were coming out of like several decades of administrations that prioritized up-brittle development over pedestrians, right? So the bill represented one of the first steps in guaranteeing sidewalk safety and accessibility for every Philadelphian. As mayor, she will continue that work. She would, first she would direct the Administration Streets Department to require sidewalk closure permit applications and the protected sidewalk feasibility analysis alongside any new applications for construction and rezoning. This would guarantee that safety is being considered before approval if any development project begins. And furthermore, she would direct increased enforcement of illegal sidewalk closures and give out tickets until those closures are changed. As mayor, she would increase funding to invest in sidewalks and ensure young people, parents with strollers, seniors, and wheelchair users can safely use our sidewalks.
Thank you. So I know that the candidates have another forum to get to.
I still have to answer the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm
no
sorry.
problem.
Go ahead.
So there is a federal requirement under the ADA that these things be done, but they haven't been done. And I think the reality in Philadelphia is we're a historic city, we're an old city, and actually making those changes is very challenging because there is an exception if it is something that is so burdensome or so costly. I think there has to be a prioritization of what we can actually do. If we had unlimited money, we could do all kinds of things. We don't, and neither do you, because actually you're paying for all of this one way or the other. Think about your tax increase in your property and your soda tax and all the things. You keep paying for every good idea that people come up with, but without transparency and accountability, you don't see the results of that. And so I think prioritizing what can actually be done and then creatively doing it. What do people actually need? And that's where we would hear from you. What is the most important thing for you? Is it an accessible restroom? How about when we have concerts? How about when you're downtown, when you're going to do things that you're required to do, like when you're going to a government building, you must be there. You have no choice to be there. Or when you're going to court, you know, what is the ease of going there? What is the accommodation? How about going through the metal detectors? What is that like? You know, in City Hall, they used to have a room dedicated for persons who would have a wheelchair and someone to help them. But then they made that a multi-purpose room, like everybody can go there now. And so when you do that, you take away the ability for persons to have a priority because it is what the law requires. The other things are optional. This is required by law. And so we have to do what is required by law first. And then we have to prioritize the greatest need for all. Politics is about pleasing a very small group of people who vote for you. Government is about serving all the people, whether they vote for you or not, and complying with the law that requires that you do certain things. I'd like to give a quick example. SEPTA, if you ever go to the platforms when you're waiting for the L, I brought a company. This company from Korea actually put in the barrier doors, sliding glass doors at the Tokyo subway system and in Seoul. So they're proven, they've done that. When you do that, when you bring your, for example, wheelchair onto the platform, you have a barrier, you're not going to roll off. Because of that, there's more room, there's cleaner air, there's a Wi-Fi, you can watch the trains come, you can watch a movie trailer, you can purchase it from down there. There's better lighting, there's cameras. They would have put it in for free. They would have made their money off of ESCO and through advertising, but SEPTA said no. And that's a lost opportunity because they're going to bring the jobs to Philadelphia, put their North American headquarters. But how do you get down the steps? You know, there are many things from the elevators to the turnstiles to making it bike accessible. All of these things can be done, but we don't have the money for it. We have to really engage in our priorities.
Thank you. I apologize for cutting you off earlier. I just wanted to say thanks to all the candidates and remind everyone to take note again of who showed up today and who has not shown up. Please keep an eye out for the voter guide that we'll be putting out in a few weeks. The candidates take a deeper dive into a lot of these questions in the guide. And I just wanted to add real quick to please not use the word handicapped. It's an outdated word, and our community prefers the word disability and disabled. And Vicki.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we thank the organizations that helped make this happen today. Of course, the Arc of Philadelphia, Disability Pride PA, Easter Seals of Southeastern Pennsylvania, Jewish Children and Family Services of Greater Philadelphia, Liberty Resources, and thank you for hosting, United Spinal Association of Greater Philadelphia, and the Disability Community of Philadelphia. Thank you for showing up. I want to remind people that also, if you missed, if anybody wants to watch this again, you can go to the Disability Pride PA YouTube channel. We've streamed it live, and it will be there for you all to watch. And just make sure you watch out for some more clips and things that you'll see on our social media. Thank you.